Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a really intriguing homeopathic remedy. It's called Baryta Carbonica.
That's right, and we're pulling our information directly from a classic source, William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica. It's basically a deep description of the substance.
Yeah, and as I was reading through the entry, one thing really jumped out. How can just one substance supposedly help with so many different things? I mean, from mental states like confusion all the way to heart problems and across the whole lifespan, too. It seems, well, almost too broad.
That's a really good question, and it gets to the heart of what these old Materia Medicas tried to do. They created these detailed drug pictures cataloging all the symptoms a substance was thought to cause or cure based on, cures like.
Okay.
So our mission today is really to unpack what Boericke wrote about Baryta Carbonica, its specific properties, who it's supposedly specially indicated for. We want to help you understand its unique profile.
Right. And just to be clear, we're presenting this as information from the historical text itself. It's an exploration, not an endorsement.
Exactly. Think of it as a look inside a fascinating piece of medical history.
Okay, let's get into it then. The first thing Boericke says is that it's specially indicated in infancy and old age. That's quite a pair. Why those two groups? The very beginning and the very end of life.
It is interesting, isn't it? Homeopathy often looks for these kinds of underlying patterns or signatures. For Baryta Carbonica, that theme seems to be about issues with development or degeneration, sort of arrested development or premature decline.
Ah, okay. So how does that play out in infants?
Well, the text mentions scrofulous children. That's an older term, often related to glandular issues or certain chronic conditions, particularly if these children are described as backward mentally and physically.
Backward meaning?
Meaning slow to develop. The text uses the word dwarfish, suggesting they do not grow and develop at a typical rate. It lists specific things like scrofulous ophthalmia, that's an eye inflammation, a swollen abdomen, and a real tendency to take cold easily.
And when they take hold?
Then they always have swollen tonsils. The text emphasizes that always. So it paints a picture of kids who are maybe physically weak, slow to develop, and prone to these specific recurring throat and gland issues.
Okay, that covers the arrested development side in childhood. Then it jumps right to the other end. Diseases of old men when degenerative changes begin. So the flip side, decline.
Exactly. It's that same theme, but in reverse, you could say. Premature degeneration, perhaps. The text points specifically to cardiac, vascular, and cerebral degeneration in the elderly.
So heart, blood vessels, brain.
Right. It mentions conditions like hypertrophied prostate, an enlarged prostate, or indurated tests, meaning hardened, and some characteristic general symptoms too.
Like what?
Things like being very sensitive to cold, having offensive foot sweats, and just a general state of being very weak and weary. So weak they must sit or lie down or lean on something.
Yeah.
It's a picture of overall vitality just fading.
It really does sound like the bookends of life, covering both ends of that spectrum of vitality. Now, you mentioned cerebral degeneration.
Right.
Let's talk about the mind. The mental symptoms described seem quite strong, too.
Oh, definitely. They really reinforce that core theme we've been talking about. The text lists loss of memory, mental weakness, people who are irresolute, who have lost confidence in himself.
That would decline in cognitive function.
Yes, and it explicitly mentions senile dementia and a general state of confusion. But there's more emotional stuff, too, a kind of bashful quality and aversion to strangers.
Bashful in senile dementia.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it? And it adds this description. Childish, grief over trifles. That really links back powerfully to the bookends idea, doesn't it? Childishness appearing alongside senile dementia. It's like the mind is either underdeveloped or regressing.
Wow, that childishness and dementia link is quite striking. It really hammers home that theme. Thinking about how they observe this stuff, it's quite detailed.
It really is. The level of observation in these Materia Medicas is quite something. They recorded everything. But let's shift gears slightly. Boericke uses this really intense phrase. Baryta is a cardiovascular poison acting on the muscular coats of heart and vessels.
A poison? That's alarming for something used as a remedy. What's going on there?
Well, that's fundamental to the homeopathic idea of like cures like. The thinking is that a substance which can cause certain toxic effects in large doses might, in a highly diluted form, stimulate the body to counter similar symptoms or tendencies when they arise from illness.
Ah, okay. So the poison label describes its potential action, which then guides its use for similar conditions.
Precisely. It's paradoxical, but central to the theory. So, despite calling it a poison, the text then describes its link to conditions like arterial fibrosis, hardening of the arteries. It says the substance is associated with blood vessels that soften and degenerate, become distended, leading to aneurysms, ruptures, and apoplexies like strokes.
So it's used for the tendency towards those very dangerous vascular problems?
That seems to be the implication in the text, yes. It also details specific art symptoms. It says Baryta accelerates the heart's action at first, blood pressure much increased, contraction of blood vessels, and also palpitation when lying on left side, when thinking of it especially, pulse full and hard.
Palpitations when thinking of it. That's very
Right.
specific.
It is. And interestingly, it connects cardiac symptoms sometimes to suppressed foot sweat. Like if a natural discharge is stopped, problems pop up elsewhere.
That idea of internal balance being disrupted.
Exactly. And beyond the heart and vessels, it's said to affect glandular structures generally, linking back to those scrofulous children maybe, and causing general degenerative changes. It lists swollen glands in the neck, near the ears, under the arms, even fatty tumors about neck.
So it's really seen as having a very deep systemic kind of action, particularly around vessels and glands.
Yes, a constitutional effect, you might say.
Okay, building on those glandular issues, let's talk about the throat and respiratory stuff.
Yeah.
That seemed pretty prominent too, especially the tonsil issue you mentioned earlier.
Definitely. It's flagged for persons subject to quinsy. That's a really nasty tonsil abscess, which is prone to separate, meaning form pus. It even says gums bleed easily.
And the key thing was taking cold easily.
Yes, takes cold easily with stitches and smarting pain. And crucially, separating tonsils from every cold. That recurrence is highlighted.
Okay. Any other throat symptoms?
Quite a few, actually. Swollen submaxillary glands, those are under the jaw, and tonsils. A smarting pain when swallowing, which is apparently worse empty swallowing. Like swallowing saliva hurts more than food,
It's true.
isn't it? Also, a feeling of a plug in pharynx. Difficulty swallowing, sometimes to the point where they can only swallow liquids, and even spasm of esophagus, the food pipe, causing gagging and choking when food enters.
Wow. And it mentioned voice use too.
Yes, throat troubles from overuse of voice and connecting to the lungs, a dry suffocative cough, especially in old people, a cough that's full of mucus but lacking strength to expectorate, like they can't cough it up properly. It also mentions the larynx feels as if smoke were inhaled.
That's a very evocative description. It really paints a picture of weakness and irritation in that whole area. And the level of detail is just incredible. Can we just touch on a few other really specific or maybe unusual symptoms? Boericke lists, just to get the full flavor.
Absolutely. The specificity is one of the most fascinating things. Let's do a quick run through. For the head, things like wens, those are cysts, and this odd sensation that the brain feels as if loose.
Feels loose, okay.
Yeah. For the face, a sensation as of cobweb, eyes, seeing a gauze before eyes, and also associated with cataracts, ears, hardness of hearing and crackling noise.
Keep going.
Nose, chorygia, that's a head cold, with swelling of upper lip and nose. And again, that's smoke idea, sensation of smoke in nose. Mouth, another weird one, paralysis of tongue, and dribbling of saliva at dawn.
Paralysis of the tongue, wow.
Then stomach abdomen, someone who is hungry but refuses food, or pain and weight immediately after a meal. It also mentions gastric weakness in the aged with possible malignancy present, and hard, intense, distended abdomen.
Okay, a lot going on digestively too. What about male symptoms or extremities?
For the male system, diminished desire and premature impotence. And an interesting note about its use in dyspepsias of the young who have masturbated and suffer from emissions, along with cardiac irritability and palpitation.
That's a very specific combination from that era.
It reflects the preoccupations and observations at the time, certainly. And finally, extremities, cold, clammy feet, and again, those fetid foot sweats. Very offensive. Also, a numb feeling from knees to scrotum that disappears when sitting, and soles painful when walking.
It's an incredibly detailed picture, right down to numb feelings and smelly feet.
So, given all these symptoms, does Boericke talk about what makes them better or worse? The modalities.
Yes, that's standard in these materia medicus.
Yeah.
For Baryta Carbonica, symptoms are listed as worse while thinking of symptoms. That's interesting psychologically.
Yeah, focusing on it makes it worse.
Right. Also worse from washing and lying on painful side. Things are generally better walking in open air. Okay. And does it mention relationships to other remedies?
Briefly, it notes a relationship to things like digitalis and radium, suggesting some overlap in action, perhaps cardiovascular. It lists dulk and silica as complementary, meaning they might work well before or after Baryta, and calc is called incompatible, shouldn't be used closely together.
And an antidote.
Yes, antidote for poisonous doses, Epsom salts. And regarding the dose, it says Baryta is slow in action, bears repetition, and repeats that point about repetition being useful to remove the predisposition to quinsy.
So, slow acting needs repeating, especially for those chronic tonsil issues.
Okay.
We've really covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From the focus on infancy and old age, that whole theme of arrested development or premature decline.
Yeah, through the distinct mental picture, the memory loss, confusion, but also that strange bashfulness or childishness.
Right. And the really strong cardiovascular indications, that poison description leading to its use for things like arterial degeneration, aneurysms, plus all the glandular swellings.
Don't forget the throat. Those constantly recurring suppurating tonsils are such a key feature according to Boericke.
Absolutely. It's an incredibly specific and wide-ranging picture for just one substance. It really does illustrate that deep, varied impact the text claims it has, especially linking the young and the old.
It really does. And looking at this level of detail in a text that's well over a century old, describing something as a cardiovascular poison, but then outlining its use for the very conditions that sound like poisoning, like aneurysms. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Think about what?
Well, about the historical process, the sheer effort of observation, the attempt to classify everything, the paradoxical nature of how remedies were understood back then. What does it tell us about how far practitioners went to categorize illness and the substances they thought could, bring the body back into balance?
It's a fascinating glimpse into a different way of thinking about medicine.
Wait.
Exercise.
So late.
Yeah.
Come back before my break.
Oh, you're done. Expired. So you take before the expired.
Before we hit up. Once you put in the fridge, it will expire.
All this I think should keep in the fridge, right? Yeah lah, keep lah tomorrow.